Bob Miglani. Hello, everyone. How are you? We are live. This is Bob Miglani, and I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon, Thursday, June 25th. Everyone watching the World Cup, you having a good time watching FIFA, the World Cup? It's phenomenal. It's great. I love it. With the Knicks winning the championship in the NBA, Sukumar and I are super delighted to be with you today. If you're in pharma, you need to pay attention. If you're in hospitals, if you engage in healthcare, you need to listen to this very important conversation today I'm having with none other than Dr. Sukumar. Sukumar, how are you? Welcome.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So what we're going to talk about, Sukumar, today is inside the patient mind. Patients, as we talk about, are our customers, are the people we serve. Ultimately, we serve them through the work we do, both of us do, Sukumar, in pharma, in hospitals, in clinics, with governments across the nation. And one of the things that's really important to understand is people change. Patients have changed. So what I want to do is today I want to talk, especially, so pay attention if you're a brand leader, if you're a marketer in pharma, if you're in commercial operations, if you're doing medical information, if you're doing clinical trials, if you're in pharma, you need to pay attention to what Dr. Sukumar is going to share with us because he has decades of insights. And I want to first give him an opportunity to introduce himself. Again, my name is Bob Miglani. I'm the founder and CEO of Hoot. I spent 20 years, a little bit over 20 years at Pfizer, one of the largest pharma companies in the world in New York City. I also spent a lot of time in doctors' offices nationwide, working with clinics and patients, hundreds and hundreds of, thousands of patients and lots of different clinics, pharma companies, and healthcare organizations. So that's kind of what I do. So, Sukumar, would you mind introducing yourself to the rest of us, please?
Sure, Bob. First, thank you for having me here. And obviously, this is a very important topic, Bob, that you're talking about. And people with various kinds of ailments, we call them patients, but I think we should call them people with ailments. And it's a very important topic to help drive and understand their mindsets, both current and future, and how you might change them and how you might get them to be more engaged. My name is Sukumar. I'm president and CEO for a company called OSG. We do a lot of work in areas like broadly called as customer insights. We also analyze a lot of data, and then more importantly, leverage technology to engage and to drive engagement with humans. And so it's all about people, it's all about customers, consumers, and in your instance, you're very much about healthcare and the minds of the people who take the medications that pharma companies put out. I've been an academic. I'm a PhD in marketing and analytics. Post my PhD, I spent close to 15 years in academia, teaching at a number of universities like University of Houston and Rice, as well as my last position at Rutgers. I also served in between as an academic dean for a global business school. After I left academia and administration, I decided to found a company called OSG. And here, one of the things we do is to help understand what drives the behaviors of individuals. So we learn more about how to nudge them and how to change those behaviors. Again, thank you very much for having me here. Delighted to be here. And as you pointed out, we work quite extensively with pharmaceutical companies as well as medical devices and the healthcare organization in general.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sukumar. You're the right person to talk right now because the world is changing very, very quickly. We know that one pharma is launching more specialty care products than ever before. Immunology, oncology, rare disease, ultra rare diseases, med devices, everything today is complex. So let's talk about what's really changed over the last couple of years. Let's talk, let's say, a decade away. What has changed, Sukumar, from the patient perspective? What were patients, people with lived experiences, right? As we say, it's not, patients is maybe the wrong term sometimes, but let's just use the word patient or person with lived experience. what was it like for them 10 years ago, and what is it like now, and how has it changed? How have they changed as a result of the last 10 years? What do you say? What are some of the two or three insights there? What have you seen?
Yeah, no, I think, I recall early 90s when the first DTC ads came out for a pharma product in the US for the first time. Not sure if you remember Celdane. And
Of
it
course.
was the very first one where individuals or consumers could actually hear about a prescription drug being advertised on live linear television.
Yes.
Fast forward 30 years now, and what we have is mammoth amounts of information about medications, new medications, and even before the medications can actually hit post clinical trials, actually hit the market. And consumers live in a digital frenzy where
Mm.
that information is available to them on their mobile devices, on their fingertips. And we live in a world where there is both information and misinformation. So if I
Yes.
were to characterize what has changed over the last 10 years, is tremendous amount of information, number one. Number two, extensive use of the digital platform, the mobile platform. It's almost become another organ of our body.
Yes.
And therefore, we live and wake and sleep with that. And then the third thing is that the type of information that gets presented to us, the amount of information and the content of the information
Hmm.
is so varied.
Yes.
You can get truth and not so truth. You can get lots and a lot little. You
Mm.
can get brevity in that information that might make you imagine the worst, or you might get such long answers
Mm.
that you might have to sit down and put your hands on your forehead and read it and wonder what am I getting out of this.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
so there is no scarcity of that information. And then the last thing I want to say is that we have AI
Mm.
teeing up some of this information, and we all know that AI is not always is perfect. 10 years ago we had to train Watson in order to be able to ask those Q&As, and now it's just readily available to every individual on the planet Earth.
Yes.
And that information is not always accurate. So I'll pause there. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think I think I agree with all of your points, and I think what I'm seeing is exactly what you said, is a massive amount of confusion. We call it the patient confusion crisis. And as you say, it's fueled by not only AI, where you're just overwhelmed. You're like, what am I supposed to do with this? And then you hesitate. Patients hesitate a lot more because they have too much information. And then the big impact, I got to be honest with you, for me at least, has been social media. Social media influencers shape a lot of the healthcare conversations today more than ever. And I remember speaking years ago to a friend of mine. He was the chief scientific officer at PepsiCo, Dr. Mahmood Khan. And I said, Mahmood, what, in your world of food, what is the biggest impact shaping food? And he said to me, Food Babe. I'm like, what's Food Babe? And it was a blogger. She's a blogger, and I forgot her name right now, but I'm speaking of her name. But she is a force in the food business, and she forced the reduction of dyes and colors in cereals and Frosted Flakes and Cheerios and Fruit Loops and all that. And so she's a big driver. So social media influencers are a massive impact and influencing the patient mind today. As a patient, as a person with conditions myself, I follow Brian Johnson. Some people don't like him, and he's this longevity guy who's trying to do things. So my point is that today the influence, you're right, and it's also very confusing and conflicting. The information we get from the digital world, if you will, Reddit, AI, social media, is very confusing to patients more so than ever. And then, so I agree with you 100% there. The other part I will kind of weigh in here a little bit from our experience. What we've seen: patient goes into the clinic, they see the doctor. Doctor says you've got this condition. God forbid it's an oncology. It's a condition. It's cancer. Okay, patient is completely overwhelmed with emotion. It's not logical. It's not reasonable. It is emotion, and their eyes glaze over. They're just and the doctor's trying to educate them about something. Then they go home and they tell their spouse and their family members and so on, and everybody is trying to influence. Your aunt, your uncle, your mom, your dad, your children are trying to influence that patient, and the patient not only has to deal with all of the paperwork and the doctors and the verification of benefits, then the AI it and the social media, and then the slew of uncles and aunts and relatives who are forcing information in their head. Don't do that. Do this. Somebody did this. This happens when you do that. So there's a massive confusion crisis because we post on WhatsApp and text messages, and that's really causing a major problem. So what we see is pharma companies. I don't know if you tell me about what you're seeing in terms of a business change in pharma today. How is this patient confusion crisis, the evolution of the patient, how is that shaping the pharma business strategies? You work with lots of pharma companies, so you have your ear to the ground. How do you see that playing out, this confusion problem? Are they coming to you more and saying, "Hey, Sukumar, help us figure this out"? Like, what are you seeing? Tell us.
Yeah, no, Bob, I think it's a great point you make there. Majority of pharma is beginning to make that move towards consumer friendly information, and I think there's been a little bit of what should I say? The package inserts that kept getting longer and longer and longer, and while pharma still kind of continues to test those and insert those in the packages. They've also now begun to recognize that all these other channels that you're talking about, the influencer, the capture on TikTok, the channel of the live television, all of these have become important. Not just the paper insert in the office of the physician, but all of these have become extremely important, and that the digital transformation is so critical in making sure that, and it's actually added a lot of burden. It's added more burden that you have to continuously evaluate what content is getting disseminated and how the uh, AEOs and other engines are picking up information about your medication and the competing drugs that are in the market.
Yeah.
How do you assess that? How do you evaluate that? So the crisis and the headache around information, call it information asymmetry, information confusion, information diffusion, all of these aspects has kind of increased, and pharma is beginning to recognize it. But I don't believe that they have a perfect solution
Yeah.
for how to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think that's where the dilemma is. Like, it's like, how do we address this problem? We know our abandonment rate is 40% of our product. We know patients drop off on month 7, right? We know that the 6 different infusions or the 3 different infusions a patient has to take, they lose some of those in the, they lose some of that. So they lose patients. They know that. They know that this happens. And often the reaction or the strategy, Sukumar, has been, well, let's get a call center and to call patients. Does that really work today? I mean, what are you seeing? Like, are patients picking up the phone when you do research? How are you doing research? How are you getting insights? Tell us about that. How do you reach
Um,
patients?
so it's a great question. One thing is, I'll break it up into 2 or 3 different responses. Right?
Mhm.
There's sort of the call center has to be staffed with the right kind of people in order to answer the questions.
Yes.
The burden on that is huge. The cost associated with that is huge. So there's a lean toward AI, and then there's a problem in AI. People are getting frustrated. They don't want to call in somewhere to get an answer and be in a position to, just get answers that are incomplete, inappropriate, or whatever the case might be. So
Mhm.
I think there's a little bit of backlash along that channel. Now, you asked a different question about how do
Yeah.
we find, recruit, and interact with individuals who might have very specific ailments, right? So it's no longer, uh, there are patient panels, there are groups where we can actually go find people and have a good conversation with them. There are advocacy groups. There are doctors who would, within the laws, be able to help us find those individuals with who we speak. Now, we do speak with a lot of patients,
Mm.
both from, just like we are having a dialogue here, we would have those dialogues with individuals,
Mhm.
but we also do very structured quantitative surveys, and we have a
Yes.
good sense for what's going on in people's minds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Depending on the severity of the ailment, there's everything from "I'm concerned, I don't know how to live my life" to "there's so much of noise, I don't know who to believe,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to address that."
Yeah.
And I myself have certain beliefs as an individual who has a particular ailment. I have some beliefs today,
Right.
but I don't know whether I should take that medication. I think a classic example is there's so much noise even with GLP-1s today,
Yes.
that you don't know what to believe. There is, there was a lot of noise that was made about GLP-1s, talking about retinal issues, uh, but we lose the context around
Yeah.
what that is or how that happened, etc. Right? I mean, so I think we have to be very cautious. I'm being very cautious not to refer to specific drugs here on this conversation, but
Yeah.
there is so much of noise, Bob, that people are even more confused. Their caregivers are even more confused,
Yes.
and you don't know who to trust. And the only person you want to trust is your doctor, and the doctor has very limited amount of time for you because they are overwhelmed with the volume of patients that they see. So
Yeah.
how do you actually solve for this problem? And it's very important because we have to solve this problem in a day and age of information overload.
That's right. So I think you said the word that I think I want to really highlight for a second. And I just want to make sure that we put it up on the comment here. And I'm going to just put it in the comment. It's called trust. We're seeing a massive trust gap. And I think you said it absolutely 100% right. Patients, people with lived experiences who have a disease, don't know who to trust and what information to trust. And so this is and the doctors don't have time. And so it's not just about the channel, right? It's not just about how you're reaching patients today, right? It's which is the digital, which is the phone, a text message rather than a phone call, perhaps. But it's important who's sending the message.
Hmm.
And I guess so. The patients trust doctors more than they do anyone else. Okay, they also trust another patient with a lived experience. So that's really important, right? So they trust them. But the question becomes, do they trust pharma? When I was at Pfizer, there was a massive trust problem in the pharmaceutical industry. This is, some years ago where, consumers and patients didn't trust pharma. And it was this big backlash against pharma. I don't know if it's still there. So, Kamal, what do you think? Is there I mean, it does when a pharma company says, Miss Patient, we're going to educate you about this problem. Do you think they trust the pharmaceutical industry?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think I'd say there are segments of people who trust,
Yeah.
and there are segments of people who begin to question whether it have some tail effects. So let's say, and I think about a small risky event that does happen causes mistrust. but
Yes.
but more and more patients or individuals with experiences are willing to listen if it
Mm.
means something that comes from a trusted source, as you pointed out, right?
Yes. Yeah.
If it
Yeah.
comes from a trusted source, they're willing to learn about it. It has to be very objective for them. Now, that is very critical for them to be willing to. I'm working right now on a particular rare disease, and individuals with this rare disease are looking to, they're willing to switch medications if it happens to be a trusted source from who they get the information about the new drug,
Right.
because it's a very rare disease. It's a very critical ailment,
Yeah.
and you cannot live with for even a short amount of time not knowing whether the medication is in you and whether it's working.
Yeah.
If I'm already using something and it's working for me, I have a strong belief that it's working for me, and
Yes.
my willingness to switch to something that you claim
Mm.
is working is sometimes under suspicion.
Yes.
And therefore it's only a trusted source, and it's only their own belief systems that need to be confirmed before they can be nudged to take a new medication. So
Yes.
I don't think I've given you a one size fits all answer
Yeah.
there, Bob,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you,
No,
you
but it's
get.
a thoughtful answer. No, it's a thoughtful answer, Sukumar. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of nuances in trust and understanding the messages. I mean, let's shift a little bit as we're talking about trust into clinical trials, right? Clinical trials, there's a big trust gap here, right?
Mhm.
We know in clinical trials, the pharmaceutical industry has a problem with recruiting patients, recruiting diverse patients, and then keeping patients in the clinical trials for completing the trial, right? Is that, I mean, it's due to a number of factors, but it's also a trust problem, isn't there? Right? Do I
Absolutely.
trust this industry to do the right thing for me and to safeguard my health when I enroll in a clinical trial? And a lot of patients, I suspect that's just one of the drivers of non-completes, right, and abandonment. What's your experience been like in clinical trials?
No, absolutely. And I think you know this, that trust is the biggest factor in improving patient retention as well as engagement in clinical trials. And that fear is a big barrier. That fear of what will this do for me, and laws were passed in order to let patients bail out of a clinical trial and go back, to their original medications if they so choose. And so, I mean, I could be talking about this subject for hours, and I don't want to bore you, but
Yeah.
certainly, and I don't want to bore the listeners, but certainly, trust is maybe at an all-time low as it pertains to patients participating in clinical trials.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's important, though, to keep them uh, trusting the trial originator and staying engaged
Yes.
to make sure that they're taking their medications. Because imagine the costs associated with the patient either dropping off or not being compliant or persistent with the medications that they're on
Mm.
can be extremely high. I mean, just one patient dropping out of a clinical trial, the cost estimated were anywhere between $50,000 to $75,000.
Mm.
So you can see what it does if the data is kind of skewed by people who are not necessarily taking the medication. So very,
Yeah.
very important to recruit, to build trust, to keep them engaged, to nudge them to be persistent with their medications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a study that recently came out, and they were talking about usability of information, and it's called Online Patient Education and Breast Reconstruction, and it was in the Journal of Plastic Surgery. Okay, Plastic Reconstructive Aesthetic Surgery, published in June this year. And it basically stated that when you give patients educational materials, okay, whether it's clinical trials or whatever, but you give patient information, they understand 61%. 61% of patients understood it, but only usability score was 21%. So they kind of got it. They're like, yeah, I get it. I get what you're trying to say, or I understand. But the issue becomes like, how do I use it? What am I supposed to do? Like, what's the next step? So that's a real big problem I think we're seeing is the disconnect from understanding to action and to be nudged. So I think that's really important. There's a comment here. I want to address it because I think it's important. So Alexandra, thank you for writing. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. I think, and here she says, I think a current big problem is that people don't want to put the effort to find the information they need. They rather go for what's easily available than accurate. Okay. Then accuracy. People don't know how to research properly and objectively anymore. This alone can influence information that patients receive through the internet and people around them. I think that's absolutely spot on. And human beings generally want easy and they want fast. And the problem is with so much information available, it's really hard to get something easy and fast. Yes, ChatGPT may give it to us. I don't know. Are you seeing this, Sukumar? Like, you might get this from ChatGPT, but is it accurate? Is it comprehensive? Is it useful? Is it valuable? Does it help you move forward? That's another whole equation. So I think you're right here, Alexandra, that, I see your views. Like, yes, you're right. And patients, by the way, are they really supposed to be expert researchers? They're not. When you're diagnosed with a condition, you're a patient, working, as a teacher, as a school teacher, for example. I don't know. You're doing your profession. Your job is not to be a professional researcher, right? And so the notion of you and the patient looking out for themselves and, going in and doing thorough research is really hard to do today. So I think that's a real big problem that you see. What do you think, Sukumar? What's your thoughts?
So, Bob, when the internet first came up, there were sites like WebMD and others,
yes,
that came up very quickly and became sort of the universal truth where patients would go in and look for information. I don't know if
yes,
you've gone into WebMD recently and tried to look for any information as if you were a patient. I think it's so populated and technical that most of the time you kind of get out of it very quickly. I mean, I got to be careful. I don't want to call them out, but I think sites like them have become a lot more difficult to interpret and understand. So there is, Alexander's point is spot on. A, there is too much of information. B, as you point out, patients are not researchers. They're not supposed to get as technical. Most importantly, they don't know what source to go to in order to confirm whether that information is correct or not. I'll give you an example. I got two pieces of information sent to me. One from my son, who took a picture of a normal bone and a foot bone, and another one that was on a GLP-1. And he says to me, Dad, is this what GLP-1 does to people? I mean, and if you had looked at the one that of what was claimed to be a person on GLP-1, you would have been really scared when you looked at those two things. Okay, so that's literally a visual piece of information that is so scary that the minute you look at it, you'll kind of run away from that medication and, maybe complete disinformation. And I know it's complete disinformation, but still. And then there's another piece of information. I got a call from one of my very close friends and chief marketing officers who comes in and says, hey, Sukumar, do you know that there was a study done and osteoporosis is a common case for people about X age, whatever it is, and there was a study done, blah, blah, blah. Now, how accurate is that study? How many patients had it? What percentage? Then when I said, what percentage of patients? It was like less than 1% or something like that, So now all of a sudden, you've got one that looks very factual because there's some so-called data behind it, and because it was he said it was a publication, but there's nothing actual factual. And then the other is a young man who decides to show images and says, look, Dad, how crazy it looks. Now, these images are easily created on AI and thrown out there. So misinformation
Yeah.
is so huge. So then to turn around to Alex's point, to ensure that the information that's made available there is accurate, that the information
Mhm.
reaches individuals who have these experiences, and that there is a single source of truth that people can go to and trust. Because I think we lack that today, and I think we need that, and we need some sort of an approach to get at that in a more systematic fashion across a number of disease areas. I hope that that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no,
I
I
know
think it.
it's
Yeah,
a perfect solution, but there needs to be some sort of a body of
yeah,
truth that everybody can rely
yeah. I don't know, but I guess the question is, given what we've seen in COVID, can patients, can consumers, can human beings have trust in anything anymore? Is my fundamental question. Because one could say, uh, you know, um, one could say, well, everything. I don't trust anything from the government. Okay, someone can say that. Oh, I don't trust anything from the government. All these large, just this large organizations that are representing doctors, groups, and so on. They're all in on it. One can have that view, and it almost seems like people don't have faith in institutions. However, they may have faith in other people who are authentic, who are sincere, who are somewhat experts. And I think that is where the opportunity lies for pharma as we're talking about this. Like, okay, so if I were to, Sukumar, if you were to design something that helps a pharma company earn trust and understand how to nudge patients forward, okay, where would you start? How would you design a program? What were the ingredients? What are the recipes of the program that would help, trigger the psychology of patients in a way that they move forward, that they nudge forward? Give us two or three insights on what you would see, strategic recommendations from you on that.
so, Bob, I think we want to take this in two parts. So the first part is um, making sure that we have the right data to design those messages and nudges that patients, when you deploy them in whatever channel you want to deploy them, that
Mhm.
they are well received because they happen to A, speak to the language of the patient, B, motivate the patient to take the right actions, right? And C, continue to nudge them so as to change behaviors. Now, this is a very big ask, but I'm saying you take a careful step of patient, we give a lot of lip service to patient centricity,
Yeah.
but we never really involve the patient directly in the design and development of this information and capturing the data that is most relevant to them, right? So that to me is very critical. And I'll give you an example. I was in a conversation with a pharma company recently where it was, how do I get patients of a particular diversity to begin to trust providing data in clinical trials, right? I mean, gene data and so on, especially when there is a certain amount of lack of trust with what the government had done many years ago
Yeah.
in an experiment or a trial that was not really formally announced. So, without getting into all the specifics and details.
Yeah.
But the question is that you go out and test messages as to how to attract patients to get involved without actually involving them in the design of these messages, in being able to get to understand what motivates them. So patient centricity starts with bringing the patient into that conversation. The second part of what you asked is, how do I deliver this? Because as an individual with an ailment, whatever that ailment is, it could be hepatitis, it could be HAE, it could be diabetes, it could be
Mhm.
hypertension, name it, right? as an individual with this experience in my life, who do I trust?
Yeah.
I don't trust the government. I don't, if you said there's 10% or 20% who don't trust the pharma company, but I'm actually willing to trust someone like me.
Mm.
I'm willing to trust another individual, another patient who has similar experiences. And so, pharma's first, if it's patient first or if it's patient centric, not only do you have to design it with involving the patients, but you also need to deliver it with patients. And we have to get away from throwing huge amounts of data into AI and expecting that AI will shape the conversation and will
Yeah.
take it forward. It really almost has to be involving those individuals or patients. Perhaps the next group there would be patient advocacy groups because there's a lot of people who are patients like you.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the third, which is I care about my caregiver who, if well educated, can guide me in the right direction, as well as I would put the third person there as the caregiver and the provider of healthcare, so that my doctor as being third on that list to deliver that. So I believe that we have to find a institutional way to scale that, where
Yeah.
the other individuals can communicate that in a very effective manner. So
Mm.
let me. I hope that makes sense. I kind of divided that into two buckets because I feel like we give lip service to patient centric care, but we
Yeah.
never actually involve the patient itself
Yeah.
in designing how to engage them in that care.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. I think the lip service is it's pretty bad out there. I mean, I've seen companies, invite patient groups, and they have a person, a colleague at the company who's responsible for patient centricity and so on. And what I've seen is they invite the patient group advocacy leader, who they might be funding them, right? They invite them to a town hall meeting, and there's all this conversation. It's a panel, and then they go home. But are they really involved in the design of the message and the program to help guide that program to make sure it makes sense to people? I don't see that happening as much. So I think you're right. I think that lip service, it's terrible, and I think it needs to be improved. I think it absolutely needs to be improved. I think having patients fully engaged, having people with lived experience fully engaged in the development of marketing programs, clinical trial programs, that are really vital to succeeding in driving the therapies to having patients to get onto therapy. I think that's really important. I think the second part of it is, I guess the question for you, Sukumar, is that, all right, so you've given us the hierarchy: patient with lived experience, patient centricity, bring them in. What do they, what the messages look like, and then go to caregiver and provider. Do you think most patients make decisions on an emotional level, or is it a couple of other elements? Talk to us about like how to nudge patients forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I want to suggest something very radical here, Bob,
Yeah.
and let's see if my radical notion here will get stones thrown at you or flowers sent to you. Okay,
Okay.
but some years ago, K drama became very popular, and there was a lot of yeah. I mean, eh,
K-pop. Yeah.
K-pop and K-drama, and yeah, and fandom was became a common word for people who watched these shows and talked about it in social media and became very much engaged in all the activities. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
you if you lifted that concept of fandom, and if you said uh, that patients are people living experiences, just as they are, watching a K-pop or a K-drama, they're now essentially living those experiences, reality TV of themselves, and they become a fan of themselves.
Yeah.
Can pharma actually think in terms of developing fans of their are fandoms,
Yes.
meaning activities around fans. Now, I'm going to use the word fans for patients, people who have great experiences with the medication they take, whether it's for a GLP-1 or whether it's a cure for Hep C or a cure coming out for Hep B. And can these fans be engaged and can these fans be so engaged that they are the voices that you begin to leverage in order to get across the value of treatments that are made available to those who are happening to be part of this reality show. So, can we move away from the term and can we create fandoms
Yeah.
of medications and through that process begin to actually understand what these people want, what will motivate them to change their behaviors in order
Yes.
to that I, as an individual, when I'm first hit with the fact that I have cancer, whether it's prostate or breast or whatever it is, I'm first and foremost in a state of shock.
Yeah.
Then I start to build my beliefs,
Yes.
right? Those beliefs are actually barriers to my moving forward. Some beliefs are good, some beliefs create a friction
Mm-hmm.
to making me move forward and do certain things that are meaningful.
Yes.
Can pharma understand the friction between the beliefs
Mm.
and the forward looking motivations in
Mm.
the mind of an individual, one individual at a time, not just a collective, here's what everybody thinks.
Mm.
And can you find those motivations that will get them moving away from those beliefs that are causing the friction from them getting to take, have better experiences?
Mm.
And in doing so, can we create fans of a pharma brand? And can we actually be able to excite them to take their medication? That's what I would suggest. And Bob, believe it or not, we do a lot of work in non-pharma related stuff, and the idea of building fans is something that we are working on for media companies. So why not think about that same concept? After all, what a media is doing is it's providing entertainment, putting us in those experiences. What pharma is doing is beginning to give me a better quality of life. We use the term quality of life all the time, right?
Yes.
So why not create fans of GLP-1,
Mm.
fans of the new Hep B drug that is a cure, fans of cures for various kinds of cancers? Why
Mm.
not create fans? Why do we still want to call them patients? And why not engage those fans in being the better voice for pharma?
I love it. I love it. I think this is a billion-dollar idea, Sukumar. I really do. I mean, Ken Blanchard wrote the seminal book, How to Create Raving Fans. In business, we deploy the strategies for our clients, our customers. How do you create raving fans? This is what we do every single day in my company at Hoot. Our team has read the book, knows the book, and understands what we have to do to create raving fans. And that's one of the reasons we, by the way, we do live streams like this is we want to try to create raving fans and give massive value. But that experience, to your point, has to be exceptional, right? The experience for pharma has to. I think that's a great idea. Is to have a vision what pharma could be doing, which is creating raving fans. And the great thing about what you say is that raving fans help you get more fans, right? So it's one of those influential, influence techniques. A, a patient who is hesitating taking your product is more inclined to start if they see another patient with the same lived experience. Oh, she's just like me. And so from fan, you can create another fan. That's sort of the concept. I love it. I think this is a brilliant, brilliant concept. I think you should write a book about it, Sukumar, by the way. I think you should write a book about it. I think it's a really brilliant idea. But one of the things you have to do to create raving fans is give massive value. You've got to give better experience than a brochure that about your drug. There's a drug for a very serious rare disease, and I went into their. I looked at some of their materials. We looked at some of their materials in the company, and it's a very long brochure. It's like it's like huge, And it's like you unfold it, and it's like the journey. I was like, oh, somebody spent a lot of time, months and maybe years, designing that patient journey and making it, getting it approved, MLR approved, everything, and putting it out there. And like, do you understand nobody reads that stuff? Like, where's the experience in that? So I think you're right. It's this notion of like, okay, great, we can create raving fans, but you've got to deliver value. You've got to deliver something that's unique, that's differentiator, right? And I think, you know, having digital, going back to digital is the way to do it. I mean, we work in the world of text messages and what is now known as RCS. We do not believe that, you know, giving brochures to patients. I mean, some cases, yeah, I think it's helpful just as a reminder, but they often get tossed or left in the back of the car. You know, I used to work in years and years ago. I used to help my wife, who's a doctor, and she asked me to create this beautiful brochure. And I spent 6 months on Vistaprint designing the beautiful thing. And I had the patient. I saw a patient of a child, and, you know, put it in. Oh, it was beautiful. It was great. And then one day I noticed the trash bin outside my wife's practice was filled with that brochure. And I said, what are we doing? This makes no sense whatsoever. And you need to live in the hip pocket of patients today. So I think you're right. I think creating raving fans, you've got to give them a beautiful experience. I think that's really important. And then the other part, I think, is it sounds to me, Sukumar, is that it's got to be well thought out, meaning it can't be in a boardroom or the conference room or a Microsoft Teams of pharma executives talking to each other. It's really bringing those other patients in. Do you guys bring in patients frequently into the work that you're doing in terms of understanding insights for clients?
We do. We have several sessions where we get patients' input. And you know, remember, you use the term patient experience. Pharma's definition of patient experience is what does the drug do for the patient? But it's focused on the drug.
Yeah.
But patient experience today is not just, yeah, there are two drugs that do the same. They both have the same chemicals. They're both called GLP-1s, and they have the whole, you know, concoction is the same. But the reality is that the patient experience goes beyond just taking the pill or the injection or the, you know, auto injector. It needs to be a lot more than that. And I think that's where the real differentiation is. And that's where understanding the patient expectation is so critical. So to your point, the patient expectation is something that we understand very well. And we help you with hyper personalizing it because there is what patients will tell you. You know, with everything, just as physicians will tell you that the first thing they want the drug to do is no harm, so they want the drug to work, meaning efficacy is most important. The same way the patient's going to tell you, I want it to work. That's the top of mind.
Yes.
But what really is different is when two drugs work the same, it's other aspects of that experience. And knowing that whole, you know, what their expectations are, how do we deliver on those expectations is very, very critical.
Yeah.
It's the first step before you can design the right experience.
Yes.
And the right experience is not just a pill or not just the information. There's so many other things, which I'm sure you know, and we can rattle on that for hours.
Yeah.
Knowing what matters to each person individually
Yes.
is critical in order to create that ability for them to interact with other people just like them and be able to disseminate that more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing I think about is often is that patients today make healthcare decisions in the kitchen, not in the clinic. And they often do it with a spouse, you know, like next to them. Because, you know, especially in a serious disease, in a complex specialty condition, patients want somebody they can talk to about it, and they're overwhelmed with emotion. And so it's not just reaching out to the patient, but, and I don't want to use, I want to use the word caregiver very lightly, because it's not, you know, it's not necessarily a caregiver, but it's a collaborator who helps you make a healthcare decision is as important to touch as the patient herself. because they're the ones who are going to be maybe the voice of reason, if you will, where the patient might be very emotional, you know. So I'm a 56-year-old guy, Sukumar. I can tell you, I've been married now 27 years or something. I don't know, 26 years, 27 years. I cannot make a decision without my wife about healthcare for our children. I'm like, honey, I have no idea. You're the doctor in the family. You have to help me figure this out, or you have to kind of lead this here. So anytime we go to the doctor with our children, I'm like, hey doc, can you just record the video? Can I just put you on video and share it with my wife because she's the one who's going to do it? So we have to understand it's multi-dimensional now. It's not just one person that you're touching. And often also we see this with parents who have young children. So, as parents, myself, 3 kids, we have severe food allergies. The kids have severe nut allergies. And, there are treatments and immunotherapy for these allergies. And we're hyper sensitive. So the patient is a child, but the decision makers are the 2 parents. So it's not just one patient. I want to emphasize that when pharma is thinking about marketing and addressing programs for patients, the patient is the child, but the decision makers are 2, which is the mom and dad in this case, and who don't often speak to each other until the kids are in bed at 10 o'clock at night. And then, where's the brochure? It's in the car, right? So it's multidimensional here that we're talking about. Is we have to really think about this. So Sukumar, as we come to the close in the next 2 to 3 minutes here, please give us some advice. Okay, let's talk specifically to a brand marketer who is launching a new product this year. Okay, commercializing a new product this year. What is your advice to them as they think about launching this product, and in terms of understanding, HCP doctors and patients and that relationship? So what is your advice in terms of helping them launch a successful product when it comes to understanding patient psychology?
Well, let's put this into maybe a 5 or 6 step process, right? To make it easier as a checklist.
Yes.
So the first thing is understand what patients expect. What are their expectations? What do they want? What matters to them?
Mhm.
Okay. And I think that's a critical aspect where you begin with engaging the patients in the very design and development of how you want to speak to them, where you want to speak to them, when you want to speak to them, who all do you need to speak when you speak to them. You made a very good point about um, it's important that you're not just speaking to the patient, but you're speaking to the patient's family and other caregivers, right? So step one is understand what they want. Step two is capture sort of that whole, what are their current beliefs? What have they understood about, what they're going to be facing when they see that particular disease? Uh, to how would you get them off of those beliefs with what would really motivate them
Mm,
to be engaged with their care. So
mm,
my step two is sort of understanding the friction between the beliefs and the motivations to change their behaviors.
mm,
Step three is with all of that, knowing what they expect, knowing that friction between the beliefs and what would change their behaviors. You now are in a position, you're armed with being able to go back to them, and don't make it a one size fits all, because that's what pharma and everyone tends to do. Because keep in mind, with the digital age, there is so much more segmentation
mm,
than there was before. Patients
mm.
are not one size. So it's
Yes.
important, therefore, as you go back to implementing, that you recognize the value of hyper personalization, and you recognize the value of being able to go back and test with those individual groups if things that you intend to message and communicate actually resonate with them. Now, there's always legal regulatory challenges, and pharma can never get itself out of that.
Yeah.
So my step four is whatever you do and whatever you test, start from the very beginning with knowing what that space is within which you can be freely moving around, and recognize that engagement is not just message or educational. Engagement is also about actual experiences. How do you get them their medication faster? How do you reach
Yeah.
audiences that are socially challenged or challenged by their incomes and so on, or challenged by education levels where that crumpled 50-page thing that is put into an insert
Yeah.
is not easily read by everybody, right? So that step four is bringing everything together and ensuring that the experience is more holistic and is not just a piece of paper or a few more digital messages.
Mm.
And then realistically, that step five is leveraging digital, but leveraging it with patients, for patients, built by patients,
Mm.
so that you can communicate with them in very much in the context of what I would call creating fandoms,
Yes.
fandoms of your treatment, and just as you would have fandoms of the
Mm.
next K-pop or the next K-drama, you want to create fandoms of your medications, and recognizing also that you can have fans, not just we as humans don't have just one disease. We
Yeah.
tend to have a constellation, two, three
Yes.
sometimes.
Yes.
The older you get, that comorbid conditions can tend to be a lot more. So
Yes.
you almost have to make fans not of one show but of multiple shows, so that they're fully understanding of how they engage in making life experiences more real,
Mm.
in getting more involved and engaged, in sourcing information that is truthful, trustable, and realistic, and easy to digest. Let's not make it so difficult to digest that it's as hard to swallow as a big pill that you might be asking them.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'll pause there. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. It does. It does. You've provided a very clear and thoughtful path to success for a launch. I would add just one piece to it, Sukumar. I think you've given us five very important pieces, but I would add one, which is really understanding if you want a successful launch today, you certainly need a very effective patient engagement strategy. But more importantly, you need to differentiate yourself with physicians today, with HCPs, with doctors. And doctors today are overwhelmed with so many reps coming at them for so many complex products. Just overwhelmed. I mean, you talk to a doctor, they have 30 or 40, 50 sales reps, field force, MSLs, okay? MSLs calling on them, and they're just overwhelmed with too much information, and everyone is being asked to educate the patient with a complex problem or complex condition and a complex treatment. So you've got and everyone is counting on that one doctor. Every sales force, every MSL, key account manager is counting on that one oncologist who works for an MSL, counting on her or him to explain the therapy. So I think understanding from a pharma perspective, you're launching a new product, you've got to understand you have to lift the burden, the heavy burden, or understand at least the heavy burden is on the shoulder of the HCP. And you've got to reduce that burden in order to make a difference. And one of the ways to do it is to develop a very effective patient education program that lifts some of the burden off of the doctor and takes some of that responsibility onto the pharma company, which is, has to be, accurate, MLR, right? It has to be medical, legal, regulatory correct, factually correct, scientifically accurate, and thoughtful. So I do think that when you're launching a new product, there's got to be some better thought to put to this, because as we know, field force is very expensive. We know that there's issues and initiatives out there at pharma looking at MSLs and saying, can we rationalize MSLs, right? So I think there's that trifecta, if you will, of pharma, HCP, sales rep, patient, that trifecta, if you will, or I guess it's four people here: pharma, pharma field force, if you will, pharma field force, HCP, and that patient, that trifecta. There's something there that needs to be improved in order to have a very successful launch. So to me, that's the way I look at the world, is like, how can we transform our sales rep? I started my career as a sales rep at Pfizer, back many years ago when we carried the bag, and it was very difficult then to get 5 minutes with the doctor. Now it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 3 every 3 months. So how can you really be effective at communicating information that the doctor already has on their phone? So it's that we have to think differently. And I think what we've talked about here today is understanding patient psychology, Sukumar, and how that shapes not only patient behavior, so that we, as a pharma industry, we can engage them better, but also I think, as strategic people who are thinking differently when it comes to launching new products with doctors. We lost you here, Sukumar, but I know you're with us. I know in presence, in spirit, you're with us. We lost Sukumar. Are you coming back? Is he coming back? There he is. He's back. So, Sukumar, last words to share with our audience today. Any tips, advice, if you could sum up, today's conversation that we had about patient psychology. Well, last remarks, please.
Well, I think patient centricity starts with understanding what patients want. So, to your point, patients want to be involved in their care. And doctors today are willing to have patients be decision. So the more we can common expectations between those two, the better we can design the right communication, the right digital platform, the right experiences. And my last thought on it is make patients your fans. Stop thinking about them as patients. So thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate the questions, the conversation, the dialogue here. And I hope it has been useful for those in pharma.
Yes, it has been useful for me. Sukumar, Dr. Sukumar, thank you so much. Again, everyone, my name is Bob Miglani. I'm the founder and CEO of Hoot. Delighted to have Dr. Sukumar, CEO of OSG. And we'll be posting this on LinkedIn. You'll be able to watch it anytime and share it. Please share it, like it, and subscribe to our Patient Experience podcast. All we do is talk about patient experience. And anyway, thank you all very much for tuning in. Have a beautiful rest of the day. Thank you, Sukumar. Have a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.